North Dakota takes a straightforward, minimal regulation approach to rent increases that's consistent with the state's overall philosophy of limited government intervention in private business. If you manage rental property in North Dakota, you have wide latitude to set and adjust your pricing with very few restrictions. The governing law is found in North Dakota Century Code, Chapter 47-16, which covers landlord and tenant relations. North Dakota does not have rent control or rent stabilization of any kind. There is no state statute that limits how much a landlord can increase rent, restricts the frequency of increases, or requires any government notification or approval before a rent change takes effect. North Dakota's regulatory environment for rental pricing is among the lightest in the entire country. North Dakota has not enacted a specific preemption statute prohibiting local rent control. But this is largely unnecessary because no North Dakota municipality has ever enacted or seriously considered local rent restrictions. The state's political climate, relatively affordable housing market, and small population make rent control a non-issue in North Dakota politics. Fargo, Bismarck, Grand Forks, Minot, and every other North Dakota community operate under the same market-based framework with no local rent caps. For month-to-month tenancies, the landlord must provide advance written notice before a rent increase takes effect. North Dakota requires at least 30 days' notice before changes to the terms of a monthly tenancy. So, if rent is due on the 1st and you want the increase to take effect on May 1st, you need to deliver written notice by April 1st at the latest. The notice should be in writing and should clearly state the current rent, the new rent amount, and the effective date. North Dakota doesn't prescribe a specific statutory form for rent increase notices, but a clear written notice delivered by a documented method is always recommended. For year-to-year tenancies, North Dakota requires at least 3 months' notice before changes take effect at the end of the annual term. This longer notice period for annual leases is important to remember. If you miss the 3-month window, the lease may renew at the existing rate for another full year. For fixed-term leases, the rent is locked in for the duration of the lease term, unless the lease includes a provision allowing mid-term increases. Without such a provision, the landlord must wait until the lease expires to negotiate a new rent amount. When the lease approaches expiration, the landlord should communicate the proposed new rent well in advance, particularly for annual leases where the 3-month notice requirement applies. For week-to-week tenancies, the notice period for rent changes follows the general one rental period rule, so 7 days notice before the end of the weekly term. Now let's cover the restrictions that apply even in this permissive environment. Rent increases cannot be retaliatory. While North Dakota doesn't have a detailed anti-retaliation statute with specific presumption periods and enumerated protected activities the way some states do, the common law principle that a landlord cannot use a rent increase as punishment for a tenant exercising their legal rights is recognized. If a tenant reports a health or safety issue to a government agency, makes a good faith habitability complaint, or exercises any other legal right, and the landlord responds with a dramatic rent increase, the tenant may have grounds to challenge it. The practical challenge for tenants asserting retaliation in North Dakota is that without a statutory presumption, the burden of proving retaliatory intent falls more heavily on the tenant. The tenant would need to demonstrate through circumstantial evidence, timing, magnitude, landlord's treatment of other tenants, absence of legitimate business justification, that the increase was motivated by the tenant's protected activity rather than by market conditions or operating costs. For landlords, this means that while the legal risk of a retaliation claim is lower in North Dakota than in states with strong statutory presumptions, it's not zero. A rent increase that is clearly timed to punish a tenant for filing a complaint can still result in legal consequences. Documentation and consistency remain the best protection. Rent increases also cannot be discriminatory. Under the Federal Fair Housing Act and the North Dakota Human Rights Act, found in North Dakota Century Code Chapter 14-02.4, Landlords cannot raise rent based on a tenant's race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, familial status, or status with respect to public assistance. North Dakota's inclusion of public assistance status is significant. It means that a landlord cannot raise rent specifically to target or push out a tenant who receives Section 8 vouchers, TANF benefits, or other government assistance. The North Dakota Department of Labor and Human Rights investigates fair housing complaints and can take enforcement action. A discriminatory rent increase, one that targets tenants based on any protected characteristic, can result in damages, penalties, and attorney's fees. From a practical standpoint, North Dakota's rental market has been one of the most volatile in the country over the past 15 years. And the story is largely about oil. The Bakken oil formation in western North Dakota triggered one of the most dramatic rental market booms in modern American history. During the peak of the oil boom, communities like Williston, Watford City, Tioga, and Dickinson experienced rental demand that far outstripped supply. Rents in Williston skyrocketed. At the height of the boom, a basic one-bedroom apartment could command $2,000 or more per month in a community that had previously seen rents of a few $100s. Landlords were raising rent by 50, 100, even 200% as workers flooded into the region. The boom also brought a wave of temporary and improvised housing, RV parks, man camps, converted commercial buildings, as the existing housing stock couldn't accommodate the population surge. The rental market in the Bakken region became one of the most extreme examples of supply and demand pricing in the country. As oil prices fluctuated and production stabilized, the western North Dakota market corrected. Rents declined from their peak levels, vacancies increased, and some landlords who had invested heavily in new construction during the boom found themselves with empty units. The Bakken rental market today is more stable than during the boom years, but remains tied to energy industry activity. Landlords in western North Dakota should be prepared for cyclical demand and should build financial reserves to cover periods when the market softens. Fargo, the state's largest city, has a much more stable and diversified rental market. Fargo's economy is driven by healthcare, technology, education, including North Dakota State University, agriculture-related businesses, and a growing service sector. The city has experienced steady population growth, and rents have increased at a moderate and sustainable pace. Fargo landlords generally have reliable pricing power, and the market supports regular annual increases in the 3 to 5% range. Bismarck, the state capital, has a stable rental market driven by state government employment, healthcare, particularly the Sanford Health and CHI St. Alexius systems, and regional commerce. Rents in Bismarck are moderate, and increases tend to be conservative. Grand Forks, home to the University of North Dakota and Grand Forks Air Force Base, has a rental market influenced by both the university and the military. Student housing near UND follows the academic calendar, while military housing demand is tied to base activity and BAH rates. Landlords in Grand Forks should understand both demand drivers when planning rent increases. Minot, home to Minot Air Force Base, has a military-influenced rental market similar to Grand Forks. BAH rate changes directly affect what military tenants can pay, and landlords near the base should monitor these rates annually. One best practice for North Dakota landlords: adjust your pricing strategy to the specific market conditions of your location. The strategy that works in Fargo, steady annual increases tracking with a stable, growing market, is completely different from the strategy needed in Williston, where pricing must be responsive to energy industry cycles. And the approach in a college town like Grand Forks is different from both. Understanding the specific demand drivers in your market allows you to set rents that maximize revenue while minimizing vacancy risk. Another best practice: for properties in the Bakken region or other energy-dependent areas, consider using shorter lease terms that allow more frequent pricing adjustments. Month-to-month tenancies or 6-month leases give you the flexibility to raise rent quickly when demand surges and to lower rent when the market softens. Locking in a long-term lease at a fixed rate during a boom period means you benefit during upswings, but a long-term lease at boom pricing during a downturn can lead to vacancies when market rents fall below your lease rate. For landlords with properties near military installations, understanding the BAH rate structure is essential. BAH rates are adjusted annually, typically announced in December and effective in January, and vary by rank, dependency status, and location. Pricing your units competitively relative to the BAH rate for your area ensures that your property remains attractive to military tenants, who represent a significant and reliable portion of the rental market in Grand Forks and Minot. North Dakota's agricultural economy also influences the rental market in farming communities. During strong commodity price cycles, agricultural workers and operators may seek housing in small towns near farming operations, temporarily increasing demand. During weak cycles, demand softens. Landlords in agricultural communities should factor commodity market conditions into their pricing decisions. North Dakota requires landlords to return the security deposit within 30 days of the tenant vacating. While this doesn't directly regulate rent increases, landlords should understand that a rent increase doesn't automatically entitle them to collect additional deposit from an existing tenant. Any adjustment to the deposit amount would need to be negotiated as part of a new or renewed lease agreement. For North Dakota landlords who participate in the Housing Choice Voucher program, rent increases must be approved by the local housing authority. The authority evaluates whether the proposed rent is reasonable by comparing it to comparable unassisted units. Submit increase requests well in advance of the desired effective date. For the complete guide to North Dakota rent increase laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our Landlord Tenant Law series.